The vanishing hitchhiker legend appears globally with chilling consistency. A driver picks up a hitchhiker, often a young woman in outdated clothing, who provides an address then disappears from the moving vehicle. The driver, disturbed, visits the address and discovers the hitchhiker died years earlier in an accident at the exact location where they were picked up. Variants include hitchhikers who warn of impending disasters then vanish, or who leave physical evidence, a scarf, address, that proves their reality before disappearing. Folklorists trace versions across cultures: Japanese taxi driver ghost, American Route 666 woman, European phantom passenger. The legend thrives because roads represent liminal spaces between life and death. Countless people die on highways, creating landscapes haunted by violent endings. Psychologically, the hitchhiker embodies anxiety about strangers, about the unknown passenger in enclosed spaces. Some researchers suggest the legend has roots in actual experiences: dissociation, hallucinations from exhaustion, or misremembered encounters combined with later learning of local tragedies. The story persists because it's fundamentally about unfinished business, spirits trapped in death's moment, endlessly reenacting their final journey, seeking help that can never come. It warns that some boundaries once crossed cannot be recrossed, that death strands souls between worlds, and that our roads carry not just the living, but restless dead still traveling toward destinations they'll never reach. During the 1937 to 1938 Nanking Massacre, Japanese forces systematically brutalized the Chinese capital for 6 weeks following its capture. International observers documented mass executions where tens of thousands were machine-gunned at the Yangtze River, Rutsingder, and Dangang River's edge. Their bodies dumped into the water until corpses clogged the flow. Survivors described soldiers conducting killing contests, competing to see who could behead 100 people fastest, with newspapers reporting the competition scores. Civilians were used for bayonet practice, buried alive, or doused with gasoline and burned. The International Military Tribunal for the Far East documented evidence of grotesque brutality that remains disturbing to detail. The atrocity extended beyond combat casualties to deliberate targeting of non-combatants, including children and elderly. Neutral zone attempts by foreign missionaries saved some lives but couldn't prevent wholesale slaughter. Post-war, the International Military Tribunal executed 7 officers for war crimes, but many perpetrators faced no justice. The event created lasting Sino-Japanese tensions. Chinese government estimates claim 300,000 deaths, while Japanese nationalists dispute numbers or deny the massacre occurred, creating ongoing diplomatic friction. Survivor testimonies preserved in memorial halls describe trauma transmitted across generations. The massacre demonstrates warfare's capacity for dehumanization, where ordinary soldiers commit extraordinary evil under military authority, and how historical memory becomes contested territory, with denial serving political purposes that compound original suffering. Kevin Costner's 1995 post-apocalyptic epic became Hollywood's most troubled production, with costs ballooning to $175 million, equivalent to $350 million today. The massive floating atoll set sank in a storm before filming, requiring complete reconstruction. A hurricane destroyed sets worth millions. Stuntman Costner's double nearly drowned during a stunt gone wrong, pulled underwater by malfunctioning equipment while cameras rolled. Actors suffered jellyfish stings, seasickness, and hypothermia in the Hawaiian waters. A plane carrying crucial equipment crashed, killing the pilot. Cast and crew worked 16-hour days in brutal conditions. Salt water corroded equipment, waves damaged sets daily, and isolation created psychological strain. Costner and director Kevin Reynolds feuded so bitterly that Reynolds quit before completion, with Costner finishing the film himself. The actress Jean Triplehorn developed such severe seasickness she could barely function. The child actor Tina Majorino suffered sunstroke multiple times. The production exceeded schedule by months, hemorrhaging money as sets rotted in seawater. The film's ultimate box office disappointment, though it eventually profited internationally, made the suffering seem futile. Cast members later described it as traumatic, months of physical danger, exhaustion, and fear for what became a mediocre film. Waterworld demonstrated Hollywood hubris, executives greenlit an impossible production, then forced cast and crew to suffer for stockholders' dreams of profit, regardless of human cost. The 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia ejected 36 cubic miles of ash into the stratosphere, creating a volcanic winter that devastated global agriculture in 1816. Average temperatures dropped 0.4 to 0.7 degrees Celsius worldwide, but regional effects were catastrophic. Snow fell in June across New England, killing crops. Food prices quadrupled in Europe, already weakened by Napoleonic Wars. Widespread famine triggered typhus and cholera epidemics. Historians estimate 100,000 plus deaths from starvation and disease. Ireland experienced its worst famine before the potato blight, with families eating grass and dying on roadsides. Desperation drove riots across Europe. Governments collapsed. Switzerland declared national emergency. The ash cloud's sulfur dioxide created spectacular blood-red sunsets that inspired painters but symbolized agricultural death. Malnutrition weakened immune systems. Tuberculosis rates spiked. The social chaos accelerated mass emigration to Americas. The disaster demonstrated civilization's fragility. A single volcano 10,000 miles away nearly collapsed Western society. Climate scientists warn that modern agriculture, optimized for stable conditions, would fail catastrophically if a Tambora-scale eruption occurred today. Global food reserves would last only months, and billions would face starvation. The 1816 crisis revealed that human survival depends on atmospheric stability, and that nature can extinguish that stability instantly, indifferently, transforming Earth into a hungry graveyard. On June 30th, 1908, at 7:17 a.m., an explosion near the Podkamanaya Tunguska River in Siberia released energy equivalent to 10 to 15 megatons of TNT, 1,000 times more powerful than Hiroshima. The blast flattened approximately 80 million trees across 830 square miles, with tree trunks pointing radially outward from the epicenter like matchsticks. Witnesses 40 miles away were knocked down by the shockwave. A man 60 miles away felt heat so intense his shirt caught fire. Seismic stations across Europe registered the blast. The night sky glowed for days afterward. People in London could read newspapers at midnight from the atmospheric reflection of the explosion. No crater exists because the meteor, likely a 220 million pound rocky asteroid, exploded 5 to 10 kilometers above ground, releasing its energy in an airburst. If it had struck hours later, Earth's rotation would have placed St. Petersburg directly under the impact, potentially killing millions. The region's remoteness meant the first scientific expedition didn't arrive until 1927, nearly 2 decades later. They found a forest of upright trees stripped bare, standing as ghost trunks in a dead zone. At the epicenter, the downward blast pressure was so intense trees remained vertical, but were completely denuded. The event proved that asteroid impacts remain a catastrophic threat. Tunguska-scale events occur roughly every 300 years, and we'd have no warning if one approached. Between 1968 and 1985, a serial killer murdered at least 16 people. 8 couples parked in lovers' lanes across Florence's countryside. The killer used the same .22 Beretta pistol for every attack, firing through car windows before mutilating victims with a knife. Female victims were subjected to post-mortem sexual mutilation, with body parts removed as trophies. In 3 cases, the left breast was excised and never recovered. The killer sent these trophies to investigators and prosecutors, including one mailed to the district attorney during a suspect's trial, proving the wrong man was imprisoned. The murders followed a pattern: weekends, new moons, isolated locations. Witnesses described a lurking figure, but police never identified him. The investigation became became Italy's longest and most controversial, featuring false confessions, tunnel vision prosecutions, and accusations that police themselves were involved. Multiple innocent people were imprisoned for years. Some theories suggested a satanic cult or organ harvesting ring. In 1985, the murders stopped abruptly. Possibly the killer died, was imprisoned for unrelated crimes, or simply ceased. The case remains officially unsolved. Florence's rural beauty became associated with terror. Entire generations of Florentines feared countryside romance. The monster demonstrated that even in modern Europe, predators can kill repeatedly without capture, and that darkness persists beneath civilization's veneer. On September 18, 1970, Jimi Hendrix drowned in his own vomit after consuming barbiturates, likely Vesperax sleeping pills, at girlfriend Monica Dannemann's London apartment. He aspirated the vomit while unconscious, suffocating over minutes as wine and pills mixed in his lungs. The ambulance crew found him alone, covered in his own sick, lips blue, no pulse. Dannemann's account changed repeatedly. She claimed he was alive when paramedics arrived, but they insisted he'd been dead for hours. The delay in calling emergency services remained suspicious. Autopsy revealed his lungs and stomach were full of red wine. He'd consumed an extraordinary amount of alcohol. His airways were completely blocked. Hendrix's manager, Mike Jeffery, had insured him for millions and stood to profit from his death. Jeffery died in a suspicious plane crash 3 years later before investigators could question him further. Some believe Hendrix was murdered, forced to consume pills, and positioned to ensure aspiration. His final lyrics, written that day: "The story of life is quicker than the wink of an eye. The story of love is hello and goodbye until we meet again." He was 27, joining the notorious 27 Club of rock stars dead at that age. His death exemplified rock excess, talent consumed by fame, substance abuse masking depression, and the industry's predatory nature. The 1925 Scopes monkey trial prosecuted John Scopes for teaching evolution, violating Tennessee's Butler Act. The trial became a circus. Prosecutor William Jennings Bryan, a 3-time presidential candidate, argued for biblical literalism, while defense attorney Clarence Darrow subjected him to withering cross-examination about Genesis inconsistencies. The town of Dayton deliberately recruited Scopes to generate publicity. He likely never actually taught evolution, but agreed to be convicted. The trial occurred during a sweltering July in a packed courtroom where spectators fainted from heat. Bryan claimed evolution stripped humans of divine purpose, reducing them to descendants of lower forms. Darrow retorted that forcing biblical views on students created thought policing. The jury convicted Scopes in 9 minutes. He was fined $100. Days after the trial ended, Bryan died in his sleep, reportedly from diabetes and exhaustion, though supporters claimed heartbreak over public humiliation. The trial exposed America's fracture: urban modernism versus rural fundamentalism, science versus faith, progress versus tradition. It didn't resolve tensions, but instead calcified positions. A century later, battles over teaching evolution, creationism, and intelligent design continue in school boards nationwide. The trial proved that facts cannot overcome belief, that evidence fails against faith, and that American culture wars are eternal. The same divisions that filled that Tennessee courtroom still define national politics today. Turritopsis dohrnii possesses the unique ability to reverse its life cycle completely. When injured, sick, or aging, it transforms all its specialized adult cells back into immature stem cells, essentially reverting to polyp stage. It can repeat this process indefinitely, theoretically achieving biological immortality. However, this immortality is nightmarish. The creature loses all memories and experiences, effectively dying psychologically while surviving physically. Each regeneration creates a new individual in the old body. The jellyfish spreads globally by hitching rides on ship hulls, surviving in ballast water, an invasive species that cannot die. Scientists study its Yamanaka factors, genes controlling cellular age. For human applications, But the implications are disturbing. Imagine an immortality that requires complete dissolution of self, where consciousness repeatedly dies while flesh persists. The jellyfish experiences no continuity of existence. It's not eternal life, but eternal rebirth through repeated death. Most immortal jellyfish still die from predation or disease before reverting. Lab specimens have reverted dozens of times, but eventually, something kills them. The organism presents a philosophical horror: survival without self, existence without experience. Its cells refuse death while its identity perishes repeatedly. This isn't longevity, it's a biological curse, an endless loop of dissolution and reformation, consciousness scattered and reformed in a flesh prison that won't stay dead. This fading Japanese tradition involved capturing hundreds of fireflies before funerals, keeping them in darkness for days, then releasing them simultaneously as the deceased spirit was believed to depart. The insects, stressed and disoriented from captivity, would create a synchronized bioluminescent display before many died from exhaustion. Families interpreted the patterns as messages from the deceased. Erratic flights meant unfinished business. Ascending patterns suggested peaceful transition. The practice required precise timing. Fireflies released too early or late would simply disperse. Buddhist and Shinto beliefs merged in this ritual. Fireflies embodied soul's impermanence and transformation. The insects' brief lifespans, some species live only days as adults, paralleled human mortality. However, the ritual's beauty masked cruelty. Captured fireflies often died in containers before release, their corpses mixed with living insects. As urbanization destroyed firefly habitats and light pollution disrupted breeding, the practice faded. Today, wild firefly populations have declined drastically across Japan due to river pollution and wetland drainage. The ritual, now, exists mainly in rural areas where elderly practitioners maintain the tradition. It represents pre-modern death rites where nature participated directly in human grief, a worldview where boundaries between human, spiritual, and natural realms remained permeable, and death was a communal event involving all living things. Recovered from a shipwreck in 1901, this bronze device from approximately 100 BCE contains at least 30 precisely cut gears that calculated astronomical positions decades in advance. Its existence suggests an entire lost tradition of complex, mechanical engineering that vanished completely. No similar device appears again for 1,000 years. The technological knowledge required to create it was apparently lost during Roman conquests and subsequent Dark Ages. X-ray analysis reveals inscriptions describing cosmic theories and mechanical operations that wouldn't be rediscovered until Renaissance Europe. The mechanism predicted eclipses, tracked the Olympic Games cycle, and modeled irregular, lunar motion using an epicyclic gear system that wasn't reinvented until 14th century Islamic astronomy. Its sophistication implies workshops, teaching traditions, and mathematical knowledge that left no other trace. Imagine if modern computing vanished tomorrow, leaving one smartphone in ocean mud. Future archaeologists would struggle to believe our civilization's capabilities. The mechanism whispers of ancient scientists whose names are lost, whose texts burned in Alexandria's library fires, whose intellectual achievements died with them. It proves the past was far more advanced than we assume, and that human knowledge is devastatingly fragile. Entire fields of genius can vanish utterly, leaving barely a fragment. During January 1909's infamous Jersey Devil Week, thousands reported encounters with a creature described as having a horse's head, bat wings, cloven hooves, and a forked tail. Mass hysteria or genuine sightings remains debated. Panic gripped the region. Schools closed, workers refused jobs, armed posses hunted the Pine Barrens. Bloodhounds tracking the creature allegedly refused to continue, cowering and whimpering. According to legend, it was born in 1735 to Mother Leeds, her 13th child, who cursed the unwanted pregnancy. The infant transformed into a demon, killed the midwife, then flew up the chimney to haunt the wilderness. Historical accounts describe livestock found mutilated with claw marks. Strange hoofprints discovered on rooftops, despite snow that would show, approach paths, and witnesses who suffered psychological breaks after sightings. The creature's screams, described as mixing woman's scream with animal roar, allegedly drove several people to madness. Napoleon Bonaparte's brother Joseph claimed to have shot at it while living in New Jersey. The Pine Barrens' isolation bred this legend. A million-acre wilderness where disappearances went unexplained, bodies were never found, and the dense forest swallowed secrets. The devil represents colonial fears of the untamed American wilderness, a reminder that some places remain fundamentally hostile to human presence. On December 6, 1917, the SS Mont Blanc, loaded with 2,900 tons of explosives including TNT and picric acid, collided with another vessel in Halifax Harbor, creating the largest human-made explosion before atomic weapons. The blast vaporized the ship entirely, leaving only twisted metal shards. It generated a tsunami 60 feet high that swept away entire neighborhoods. The explosion was felt 250 miles away. Nearly 2,000 people died instantly, or within hours. Many were decapitated by flying glass shards as they watched the burning ship from windows. The blast wave traveled faster than sound, meaning victims died before hearing what killed them. Over 9,000 were injured, including hundreds blinded by shattered glass that lacerated their eyes while they observed the harbor fire. A Halifax Herald typographer's head was found on a roof 5 blocks from where he'd been standing. The blast cloud mushroomed 20,000 feet into the air. Richmond neighborhood was obliterated. Wooden houses became lethal splinter storms, impaling residents. Bodies were burned beyond recognition, requiring mass graves. A subsequent blizzard buried survivors in collapsed buildings, freezing many who might have lived. The disaster created Canada's first large-scale emergency response protocols, born from this single morning's incomprehensible carnage. George Reeves, the 1950s Superman, was found dead from a gunshot wound to his head on June 16, 1959, in circumstances so suspicious that investigators never conclusively ruled it self-harm or murder. He was naked, shot from an awkward angle, with no powder burns despite the close-range wound, and 3 spent shell casings were found, though only 1 shot was fired. Witnesses reported hearing the gunshot 30 to 45 minutes after they claimed to have heard it. His career had stalled, typecasting destroying his acting prospects. Christopher Reeve's 1995 horse riding accident left him paralyzed, unable to breathe without a ventilator, surviving 9 years in this state before dying from an infected bed sore that caused cardiac arrest. Lee Quigley, who played baby Superman in the 1978 film, died at 14 from solvent abuse. Margot Kidder, Lois Lane, struggled with severe bipolar disorder, found living in boxes during a 1996 psychotic episode. The curse encompasses peculiar tragedies beyond coincidence. Multiple actors faced career destruction, paralysis, mental illness, and mysterious deaths. Whether supernatural or statistical anomaly, the pattern haunts Superman mythology. Actors portraying invincibility repeatedly meet vulnerability's cruelest manifestations. The spontaneous 1914 Christmas truce saw enemies emerge from trenches to bury decomposing corpses rotting in no man's land. Some dead for months, their bodies so degraded that identification was impossible. British and German soldiers worked together to inter remains, often finding bodies of their own comrades partially devoured by rats. They exchanged cigarettes and alcohol while standing among the putrid dead, singing carols in the freezing mud. Some units played football using makeshift balls, literally across ground soaked with their brother's blood. The truce wasn't universal. In some sectors, snipers continued killing while nearby troops celebrated. Officers on both sides were horrified. High command viewed the fraternization as near mutiny and immediately implemented harsh punishments to prevent recurrence. By 1915, artillery bombardments were deliberately scheduled for Christmas to eliminate any possibility of peace. The men who participated understood they'd return to trying to kill their new friends within days. Many letters home expressed the surreal horror of this, shaking hands with men they'd shoot at tomorrow. The truce demonstrated that ordinary soldiers recognized the war's absurdity, yet continued fighting for 4 more years, killing millions in a conflict most considered meaningless madness. Takotsubo cardiomyopathy literally causes the heart's left ventricle to balloon into a shape resembling a Japanese octopus trap, severely compromising its pumping ability, triggered by extreme emotional or physical stress, death of a loved one, devastating news, or intense fear. The syndrome floods the body with stress hormones like adrenaline at levels up to 30 times normal, temporarily stunning the heart muscle. Patients experience crushing chest pain, shortness of breath, and cardiac arrest symptoms indistinguishable from a major heart attack. Approximately 90% of cases occur in postmenopausal women, though the reason remains unclear. While most recover within weeks, about 5% die from complications including heart rupture, blood clots, or cardiogenic shock. The condition demonstrates the terrifying power of psychological stress to cause immediate, life-threatening physical damage. Brain scans of survivors show abnormal activity in emotion processing regions during acute episodes. Some patients develop the syndrome from positive events, winning the lottery or surprise parties, proving intense emotion itself, regardless of valence, can be lethal. The heart literally breaks from feeling too much, a poetic yet brutal reminder that minds can kill bodies through pure emotional force. Joseph Merrick's severe deformities, likely caused by Proteus syndrome, left him with a massive skull weighing approximately 11 pounds, which he couldn't support while lying down. On April 11, 1890, at age 27, he was found dead in his London hospital room, having apparently attempted to sleep normally despite doctors' warnings. His oversized head dislocated his neck vertebrae, causing asphyxiation. Before finding refuge with surgeon Frederick Trevis, Merrick endured horrific exploitation, beaten by a showman who stole his life savings, exhibited naked before jeering crowds, and once abandoned in Belgium where police found him collapsed at a train station, unable to speak clearly due to facial growths. His right arm was so enlarged and deformed it was essentially useless. Tissue growths covered his body, emitting a persistent odor. Despite his brilliant mind and gentle nature, he spent nights alone, unable to sleep lying flat, propped upright in chairs. His skeleton remains preserved at the Royal London Hospital, though never publicly displayed per his wishes. The psychological torment of being constantly stared at, coupled with the physical agony of his condition, made his life a study in human suffering and resilience. The charred remains found in Norway's Isdalen Valley on November 29, 1970 belonged to a woman whose face had been deliberately disfigured, likely by whoever positioned her body. She was discovered in a remote hiking area, partially burned, surrounded by sleeping pills bottles and an empty petrol container. Her fingerprints had been sanded off, all clothing labels removed, and she carried 9 fake passports with different identities. Isotope analysis of her teeth revealed she'd lived across Europe, possibly Eastern Europe. Coded notes in her luggage, written in a cipher never deciphered, suggested espionage. Witnesses reported her checking into hotels under various names, wearing wigs, and speaking multiple languages. The autopsy revealed lethal levels of phenobarbital and carbon monoxide, but whether she was murdered or took her own life remains disputed. Her face was so damaged that reconstructions vary wildly. Norwegian police suspected she was a Cold War operative, possibly Israeli or East German. She was buried in a zinc coffin to preserve remains for future DNA testing. 50 years later, her identity remains unknown, one of Europe's most haunting unsolved deaths. Freddie Mercury spent his final months confined to his Kensington mansion, his body ravaged by AIDS-related complications, including Kaposi's sarcoma lesions and near blindness. He weighed barely 100 pounds when he died on November 24, 1991, just one day after publicly confirming his diagnosis. During his last recording sessions for Made in Heaven, he was so weak he could barely stand, yet insisted on completing vocals while sitting, sometimes coughing up blood between takes. His partner Jim Hutton described finding Mercury unable to walk without assistance, his feet covered in painful sores. The singer refused strong painkillers until his final days, wanting to remain lucid for his work. In the 1980s and early 90s, AIDS carried devastating stigma. Patients were often isolated, and many died alone in hospital wards. Mercury's physician prescribed experimental treatments, including AZT, which caused severe side effects. His death certificate listed bronchial pneumonia as the immediate cause, a common final complication when the immune system completely fails, drowning patients in their own fluid-filled lungs. The 1618 defenestration of Prague began when Protestant nobles hurled two Catholic imperial governors and their secretary from the third-floor windows of Prague Castle, plummeting approximately 70 feet. Remarkably, all three survived. Catholics claimed angels caught them, while Protestants attributed it to the dung heap below breaking their fall. This act of defiance ignited the 30 Years' War, one of Europe's bloodiest conflicts, claiming an estimated 8 million lives through combat, famine, and disease. In some German regions, populations declined by up to 60%. The war featured unprecedented brutality. Mercenary armies routinely pillaged towns, and civilians faced starvation as agricultural systems collapsed. The conflict fundamentally reshaped European politics and religion, establishing the principle of state sovereignty. Bohemian archives preserve chilling accounts of the executions that followed, including the 1621 beheading of 27 Czech Protestant leaders in Prague's Old Town Square, their severed heads displayed on the Charles Bridge for a decade as a macabre warning against rebellion.